Today's show is dedicated to the word kiddo, as in the English abbreviation for the word kid, a la children. You will most commonly hear this with parents when talking about their own kids and having to leave, and sometimes even to get out of social situations that they don't want to be in. For instance, if they're at a dinner party that is just the worst and they want to leave, they might say something like this: "Well, guess it's time to get these kiddos home to bed." Night over, crisis averted. But there's one thing I noticed about the word kiddo, or the slang, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, really, what I'm trying to say is it's a good thing, because you never hear somebody using the word kiddos in a negative context. Like, you don't hear some kind of Gran Torino, elderly gentleman that is very angry. You never see him screaming at a bunch of kids saying, "Get off my lawn, you no good, dirty kiddos!" It just doesn't make any sense. So for that, I think we can be grateful. Now, on with the show. Is looking at you, kiddo. I wish the recording of this coffee coming out of the Keurig didn't sound so much like urination. For all you know, I could be urinating. I'm not. Okay. Almost done. If you're still here by episode 6, I'm sure you've come to expect these kind of antics. Again, that's a machine. Okay. Get a little stir action going. And we are golden. Let's go outside, shall we? Heard it might rain. Aha. It seems it is. Here we are again, friends. It is an overcast afternoon. I'm no virtuoso musician. I love music, and honestly, I learn a chord here or a chord there just to write the next song. So I wouldn't say I'm like some amazing composer or something. I make music for like the episodes, and I've done music for several years, but there's something about certain chords that hit me, some kind of way. For instance, I'm going to grab this guitar. Hold on. For instance, we have the regular major chord. Sounds nice, huh? But just by adding one little note, it completely changes the whole vibe of the chord, in my opinion. My expert opinion. So again, major chord, but then add one little element of it. And now you got a whole nother vibe, which, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the way that sounds, and I think that's why I like it so much. I don't know, it's got this sadness, it's got this dreaminess and airy quality to it, and a little bit of hopefulness. I don't know if that's the classical definition of the word solace, but that's what comes to mind. And again, that's just taking a regular major chord and adding one little note, and then now it's what they call a major 7 chord. Not really sure why I'm telling you all this, but if you're still listening, then I think I don't have to explain every little thing. But today's story is called I Lost My Wooden Sailboat. And it's one I've been looking forward to doing, but it's also one that's, like any story, it's got some emotional baggage to it. Like I said, it's an overcast day out, and I've got my coffee right here. Oh, shoot. Well, I had my coffee right here, and there are very few things in this life that I enjoy more than the rain. There's just something about the overcast, there's just something about it. I can't explain it. I think I've always loved the rain ever since I was a little kid. I remember back when I was probably, 15, or maybe 16, maybe 17, or maybe 15, maybe 16, maybe 17, no, maybe 16, maybe 15, maybe 8, maybe 14. Okay, I'm sorry. No, it was probably like 15. And I think it was either summer break or winter break or something like that. And that song by Norah Jones was on. I think it was either on my playlist or whatever. But I remember taking a nap and waking up. And it was one of the most peaceful naps I've ever had in my life, because I just remember walking to the window, looking out, and it was raining, and it was overcast, and there was a sadness in it, but it was a certain kind of sadness that was comforting. And I honestly think, that was way over 10 years ago. God, maybe even 9 years ago. Ever since that experience, I feel like I've been chasing that and trying to relive that moment. I listen to that song by Norah Jones all the time, just thinking of it, don't know why. The song Don't Know Why. And that's always been something that's tied to the way I'm wired, and I don't like to throw certain words around lightly, but when I say the word depression, that conjures up a lot of feelings for you, depending on what your experience is with it. I know it's not something to be talked about lightly, and but I've never been clinically diagnosed as that, so I'm not trying to make light of that, and I'm not a doctor, obviously. But I do know ever since I was a little kid, I've always been what I've come to coin the term as prone to melancholy. I don't know, it's just, I feel like ever since I can remember, I've, not like it's a talent or something, but I've been able to find something to be sad about in everything, and the older I've gotten and things, life experiences, whatever, it's happened more and more. And I don't know, it's something you can't just shake, and it's not something you can just get over, and there's not some quick, easy answer. And for the longest time, I was afraid of that. I was afraid of there not being a cure. I was afraid of not having an answer, but I'm just now starting to realize that for the time being, it's okay to not have the answers. And the thing about it is, traditionally, people that maybe haven't struggled with that as much, or can't really identify with that sort of, burden or whatever you want to call it, they're a lot of times the worst sort of melancholy or sorrow or sadness, even the D word, depression, is there's no good reason for it on paper. And that's one of the, that's one of the trickiest things about it is, because human beings, we want to be able to fix something. If something's wrong in my car, like I want to know what it is. I want it to go wrong at the mechanic shop so we can fix it and be done with it. But when there's not a precise source for all of it, it's very difficult because it kind of leaves people around you helpless, or it can, if you let it. So I don't really know exactly how that ties into the story. I mean, there is rain, obviously. It's one of the main elements of it. And I don't like to put a whole lot of warnings out there for stories that I write, because I think the element of surprise is something very valuable in audio and stories and stuff like that. But there's a couple little parts of possible things that might be a little disturbing. Nothing crazy, but I'll probably put a little explicit warning on the actual podcast. And from here on out, I won't make these preambles about I don't want to do too much warning because I just don't know how far to go with that. So if I'm not sure, I'll just put an E for explicit. But back to the rain, people. And like I always say, thank you so much for listening, and I'm glad you guys can, wherever you're at. I don't know if you're at work or driving or doing the dishes or whatever, but I really appreciate you stopping by. And if you are also prone to melancholy, maybe you found some things that help. Maybe hit up the show on social media and talk about it. I know it's not the best place to talk about it, but somewhere. Some lyrics from some of my favorite songs come to mind when I think about this stuff, this idea of being sad, and is that okay, and do you grow out of it or not? One of my favorite bands of all time is Oasis, and one of the main songwriter, Noel Gallagher, he's got a song called Half the World Away, and one of the lyrics is, my body is young, but my mind feels very old. And I don't know if you can relate to that, but I certainly can. Sometimes I feel like I feel like I've lived 1,000 different lifetimes and don't have any recollection of them, and sometimes you just don't, I don't know. It's hard to even put it into words, it just feels like there's this dark cloud that's kind of always in the background, like a haunting specter or something of melancholy or sadness or whatever, sorrow, And if you go through that, I really hope you got people around you, or they come to you, or you go to them, that can support you, and reach out, even if you can't. Try to reach out, because I don't know. Maybe that's why I've got such a crazy off-the-wall sense of humor, is because someone said that the last line of defense before insanity is humor. When things are so crazy or so bleak feeling, and sometimes you can't help but just laugh. It's not making light of it, but it's, what else can you do, And then, being introverted doesn't really help a whole lot. There's an artist named Hazel English, and she has a song called Make It Better. And one of the first lines, I think the first line is, I want to be seen, and yet I want to be invisible. And that sums up, I think, I don't know, melancholy or introversion or whatever very well. I mean, I both want to be on my own, but I want to be known as well. Or John Foreman, from Switchfoot, another great band. He says, maybe I've been a part of the cloudy. Maybe I'm the chance of rain. Maybe it's something, inside and out. I don't know. It does just feel like, it's not like I'm crying every day or something, It's not like I've got this crazy bad outlook, but it kind of feels like, I don't know, maybe like you have a glass of water, and you get a little eyedropper of ink, and then you drop ink in there, 2 or 3 drops, and then it dilutes and kind of disintegrates. Even though you don't see it, it's there, That's kind of what it feels like. I'm just going to keep quoting bands for the next 3 hours. No, I'm just kidding. Last one I'll quote, music-wise, would be the Oh Hellos. They're really great, like indie folk band. There's I think 267,000 members of it, so, but Maggie, one of the singers, she sings something about, many are the days that I've wanted to cease, lay myself down and find some relief. Heavy is the head that gets no sleep, but I'll bury it before it buries me. And that sounds kind of dark, but it's very true. And it's not like a super, like, I don't know. It's just this idea of wanting to, somewhere to be safe, I guess, or somewhere to be sheltered from the storm, I guess you would say. But yeah, that's kind of where I've been coming from. And I think they're tied. My love for the rain and my prone to melancholy, those two things have always been kind of inextricably bound, you know? And there's just something about the rain that I love, whether it be Paris or London. That's what I picture in my head, even though I've only been to the London airport. So I'm basically a British citizen. And Paris, God, I've seen over 8 pictures of Paris, so I'm pretty much expert there. But I think of the rain, and there's just nothing better than some nice piano music and, I don't know, just maybe a cup of coffee like I had before it just got destroyed. And where I can just sit back and think and look at the beauty and the sadness. Anyway, that seems like a crazy ramble, but that's what these preambles are. Preamble. So now let's get on to the amble, okay? Alright, enough of this gooey show of emotion, all this lighthearted talk. Just kidding. But seriously, if you can relate to what I'm talking about, please reach out to somebody. I know it's difficult, and that's the most counterintuitive thing for me. I don't want to talk to anybody. I want to be inward, and I want to be, focus on what I'm feeling or whatever. But I don't know, give it a shot, talk to somebody. And I'm not trying to make this sound like a PSA, but you know what I'm saying. I got one more thing I want to read that really was, I don't know, it's from Charles Spurgeon. What he says about it, but especially about melancholy, because he struggled with it his whole life. It's not what I would expect from the source material, but he says, "Especially judge not the sons and daughters of sorrow. Allow no ungenerous suspicions of the afflicted, the poor, and the despondent. Do not hastily say they ought to be more brave or exhibit a greater faith, and ask not, why are they so nervous and so absurdly fearful? No, I beseech you, remember that you do not understand your fellow man." Again, I don't really know why I'm saying this, but other than to say that this is kind of what went into the story, and those are the things that where I'm coming from, and I hope you like it. I hope you can relate, and if not, then I'll probably never hear from you again. What the heck? Anyway, I guess the only thing left to say is you're listening to Several Stories High. I'm Nathaniel David Knox, and I've got a story to tell you. It's called I Lost My Wooden Sailboat. Shall we begin? Welcome to Several Stories High, a narrative podcast featuring original stories from all corners of the spectrum. Fiction, fact, or perhaps more appropriately, somewhere in the great galaxies between. I'm Nathaniel David Knox. Let's see how high we can climb. "1958 was a good year for most of the little farms that hugged the rural outskirts of Irondale in the heart of Wexler County. But as for Clyde Overstreet's, his was most certainly one of the few and sad exceptions. Maybe this was the real reason why he struck his only son Bradley clear across the face with an open palm. And all was eerily quiet in that dim hallway once he did. Bradley, not a blonde hair past 11, stood with an unflinching, reverent attention despite his searing lip. The scruffy Clyde stood over his reddened boy, panting and hunched like some sort of dehydrated beast. Maybe you'll remember better now, huh? Now where is it? I'm not going to ask you again. Bradley stuttered, resisting the incredible urge to sob. It was Jitters. Boy. Think you're going to pull a fast one on your old man? Now don't you go blaming it on that damn dog, or you'll get a hell of a lot more than a pop on the mouth from me next time. The boy's eyes dashed through the dim hallway, and then caught a nearly empty bottle of rum on the kitchen table. It wasn't the first time he'd seen it on that day, and he was certain the thing was nearly full before they left for church earlier that morning. Fearing his eyes had wandered for too long, Bradley refocused to his father. Clyde Overstreet slicked his damp, dark brown hair back from his coarse face. If Bradley thought he could have gotten away with such a brazen violation, he might have scrunched his nose and furrowed his thin blonde brow in disgust. The man's face was dirty, like an old wash rag that was well past its heyday. His forehead was especially sullied, bearing beads of sweat just about as hefty as a pearly or cat's eye in any marblesmith's arsenal. The boy wondered why his father was sweating so heavily, especially given the fact that it was an overcast afternoon, scenes of which he could plainly see through the open door that was poised for a lazy cross breeze. A kind, gentle wind brushed through the house, and just as Bradley Overstreet began teetering upon the precipice of a pleasant thought, he caught the swift, subtle cracking of his father's knuckles. He immediately mumbled to make up for lost time. Dad, I swear I just picked it up from the mantel to look is all. Honest. Then I went out and I sat on the porch, and then the phone rang. Yeah, so I set it down for just a second, and when I came back, I saw Jitters running off with it in his mouth. Clyde sucked his teeth and placed his hands on his hips. That right. So it's the telephone's fault now too, huh? No, sir. I didn't mean that. I just... Who called? Todd, said Bradley, after his eyes dropped down to the hardwood floor. That McSwiggin boy? No wonder. Kid's a bad influence on you with all that superhero comic book hogwash. That garbage is turning your mind to mush. He just wanted to see if maybe I could spend the night at his house Friday night after school. Clyde laughed as cold as ice when he stomped over to the living room and cranked on the old wooden radio. He sat on a weathered old patchy easy chair and stuffed a half-smoked cigarette into his mouth. He relit it and puffed 2 or 3 times before leaning his glistening head back and closing his eyes. He looked as if he were sitting in some sort of steamy bathtub, far, far away. Bradley? Sir? How many times I told you not to touch that little sailboat? A bunch. And why's that? 'Cause it was Granddad's. And where's he now? Fairfield Cemetery? That all of it? Bradley exhaled in a somber, routine tone, looking down at his Sunday best attire before saying, Fairfield Cemetery. Dead and gone. Dead and gone, his father repeated rhetorically, then mumbling, Sometimes a sailor just don't come back to port. Clyde Overstreet did not look up from his tobacco-induced trance, but he merely grunted, as if toiling with the horrible dream beneath the soft crackle of the baseball game, the Railers and the Nationals. Bradley. Sir? You're only a boy. But sooner or later, you've got to own up to your actions. Now, don't you step foot in this house again until you find that sailboat. Understand? Yes, sir, but can I first change out of my... Go on, he snapped. Get! Bradley bolted down the hallway and shot out of the farmhouse, nearly tripping down the periwinkle blue steps. His anger was the lone gatekeeper that kept the tears at bay when he rounded the side of the house towards the back in search of the cursed dog that had caused all this. The boy spat as he passed several old rusty chicken coops, all of which were the conglomerates of a newly christened ghost town, devoid even of old feathers. Oh, how very much did Bradley Overstreet wish that he lived with his mother. A A rumble above, a final look behind, and the boy in his Sunday best began to scour the overgrown background of the now defunct Overstreet farm. He called in all directions, but no such canine emerged. He passed by several patches of tall, thick weeds that sat as defiant islands unto themselves. He made his way over to the old barn, which had a smaller shed attached to it on the left side. Bradley looked all around the paint-peeled corners of the old structure, to no avail.
Jitters! Come on out, pup! Here, boy!
As he walked through ankle-high grass towards the other end of the grounds, Bradley looked up at the dark clouds fearfully. He unhinged the top button of his bright blue and white patterned dress shirt, praying that he'd find the dog before the rain found him. He finally reached the other end of the yard, which was marked by an old barbed wire fence that bordered the Fitzsimmons property. The boy sighed. He turned his gaze back towards the house, which now sat a good ways down in the lowlands of the slightly less defiant sea of grass. And just when he started to make his way back, something caught his eye. Could it be?
Jitters!
He cried. Bradley approached the dog. The pup was standing playfully on an old rotted tree stump.
Stay. Good boy.
Said Bradley, slowly stepping like a soldier in a minefield.
Stay. Good pup.
The little brown mutt stood still, his eyes wide and teeth gripping the raggedy cloth sail of an old wooden toy boat that dangled past his slobbery chin. Bradley offered an outstretched hand. Jitters wagged his tail. Softly, Bradley reached for the sailboat, but Jitters reared back his head. It was like the hound was playing some sort of deranged game of cruel teasing. Bradley began to perspire, and he puffed fits of frustrated air through his swollen lip. He reached again. Jitters hobbled off the stump.
Jitters, come here!
Thunder clapped above, and a bolt of lightning soon followed. And then the rain fell. The cascades were profuse. Jitters took off like a rain-resistant rocket.
No!
Bradley yelled. The boy ran hard after the sailboat bandit. He chased the little dog through weeds, over logs, and around the big green tractor. Then Jitters dashed back in the direction of the house. Bradley sprinted behind, hoping by some small miracle that the dog would make his way back to the porch and somehow drop the thing. But to Bradley's dismay, Jitters ran straight inside the old vacant cow pen, which was now presently nothing more than a wide pit of fermented filth, fenced in by feeble wooden railing. The boy stood against the fence, peering through the rain at the little brown hellion that stood, smack dab in the middle of the dirt and old manure. The filthy ground was flickering like tiny brown flames of pelting rainfall.
Jitters, come here!
Lightning shattered across the gray sky, and the creature called Jitters dropped the little wooden boat and ran off, fading far away into the storm. Bradley looked on in horror. The sailboat was in the mud, protruding from the grime a capsized barge, mere seconds from sinking below a colossal brown tempest. He winced and wiped his dampening bangs from his eyes. What's a boy to do? Dare he test the wrath of the bewitched patron inside? No, not if he wanted his lip to heal in time for he and Todd's adventures come Friday, if the stars should choose to align themselves that way. Bradley looked back at the farmhouse. His father was walking in his direction rather ungracefully, as if his legs were two spaghetti noodles laced by old boots. He knew what he had to do and how little time he had to do it. Bradley squirmed through the fence. He saw the remnants of the boat above the mire. If he could calculate it just right, he could grab the sailboat in 5 big steps and make a mad dash for the other side of the house without his father seeing. From there, he could hose off the stronghold of the boat's grime that the rain couldn't cure. Then he'd do the same for his dress shoes, and none will be the wiser. Bradley swung his hands back and forth in preparation, just as a trapeze artist might. He breathed out once more, and alas, he leapt. But his foot did not meet the firm plane that he had anticipated. How deep his right shoe sank into the mud until it stopped halfway to his knee. The boy yelped and balanced his free foot midair precariously, kicking and flailing it about like a crazed mule. He planted his other foot down as if it were atop hot coals. Desperately, he yanked his first foot out and made another bound, sinking even deeper than before. He reached helplessly at the thumb-length point of the tiny sailboat that still peeked from the mud. His heart was racing with terror.
Boy, what in the hell are you doing?
Bradley turned only his head towards his father, who was standing behind the fence now. He was wearing a tattered old fedora that made warm pops and crackles when the raindrops crashed on it.
I was just looking for something,
said Bradley, ashamed at his silly positioning in that dingy old cow pen. Clyde Overstreet squinted in the rain, and when his narrow glazed eyes spotted the tip of the sailboat, he stroked his chin, huffing and puffing.
Gotta be kidding, boy. You lost your mind? Dad, it was Jitters. He dropped it here. If you could just give me a hand to help me,
said Bradley, trying to pull his leg from the knee-deep mud.
We could get it out and rinse it off. Sir? Help you?
Yelled Clyde.
Help you? And let you get out of there scot-free? No, sir.
He surveyed his son.
And I'll be. Ruined some fine pants, did you?
Clyde spit and continued even louder now.
Son, you got yourself into that muddy pile of shit and you best get yourself out. Crying shame, boy. Always reading them damn comic books. Well, go on, fly away. Fly away, Superman, to save the day. Be the big hero. But Dad, please. I need you. Dad, I need you. Enough,
yelled Clyde, raising his hands.
I'm not gonna say it one more time. Get yourself out of that mess and don't you come back inside without that sailboat. Is that clear? Sir,
said Bradley, panting and cramping in the flickering filth. Clyde Overstreet squished and stomped away without another word. Bradley knew not what to do, be it weep, or yell, or die. He watched the constant trickle of rainwater cascade down his nose and chin before hitting the manure, and the stench that followed was putrid. Bradley vomited below the downpour. He wiped his mouth and looked on to where the boat had been. Only rainy sludge remained.
no!
He shouted. Bradley did not step, but dove for the spot that the sailboat had been. He belly flopped into the muck with a huge splat, which momentarily submerged his face in the cold, wet filth. He re-emerged and shoved his hand into the mushy mountain until it reached his shoulder. He moved his fingers all around, with not so much as the poke of a toothpick. It was in there somewhere, he thought wildly, holding his breath. Soon he plunged his other hand into the grime, vomiting a second time before continuing on his hellish scavenger hunt.
Come on.
He said, his heart beating faster. The sounds of rain dribbling upon frantic squishes accented the high-pitched whining sound of a boy covered in brown. The same boy that knew, for a fact, that if he did not find that which he sought, then a bloody lip would be the faintest and friendliest of maladies in store for him. Still, no sailboat surfaced. Bradley Overstreet started to weep, lying prostrate in the soggy excrement, his blonde, now brown head pressed down.
Bradley? What in the world are you doing, son?
The boy peeked up from the pile, his forehead half soiled. A different man was standing behind the fence. It was Raymond Barry, his mother's second and current husband. He wore a white-collared shirt with dark gray slacks and horn-rimmed glasses and a magical smile. Bradley smiled weakly, emptily even, and spoke.
I lost my wooden sailboat. I lost it. Ah, it's too bad. I always liked that little thing.
Said Raymond.
Ray.
Said Bradley, ashamedly.
Yeah, son. You think you could help me?
Without a reply, Raymond Barry scaled the wooden fence and stepped through the muddy grime, sloshing and splashing until he reached the boy. Deliberately, delicately, he fell to his knees, into the manure, and he rolled up his newly stained sleeves.
Let's take a little look-see,
he said inquisitively.
Where'd you last see it?
Bradley was too surprised to speak, but he did manage to point a sullied finger to the spot. Raymond plunged both hands into the manure. He turned his head away, his face similar to one about to sneeze.
Woo-wee! That's pungent,
he said, flashing a quick wink amidst his repulsed, rain-kissed face. The two toiled like bakers in that rain for 15 minutes solid. Ray did most of the searching, and Bradley simply intended not to drown.
I take it your dad's not too happy about you losing his heirloom out here?
Said Ray as they continued.
No, sir,
said Bradley with a strange, almost sarcastic laugh.
What's that face for?
Asked Ray, elbows deep in dung.
Huh? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be disrespectful,
said Bradley, wiping his face with the few clean inches of arm.
Then what? It's just funny is all. How so? The sailboat. Well, you see, it's actually mine. No kidding. It's true. My granddad gave it to me before he died. Well, then why does your dad, he doesn't trust me with it, or anything, really. Likes controlling stuff, I guess. I don't know.
Ray puffed, both to ponder and expel the stench in one fell swoop. After a few more plunges, he looked over to Bradley, who was almost fully bathed in muck.
Well, what say we get you out of this mess and get cleaned up, huh?
Said Ray before looking to the pouring heavens. Bradley looked worried.
But the sailboat, my dad said if I don't... Look,
said Ray, placing his dirty hand on the boy's dirtier shoulder.
I got a friend that owns a sailboat. A real one. Keeps it docked out in Lake Van Buren. One of these days, when the weather permits, we'll go out for a real day at sea. How's that sound?
Bradley smiled wide, droplets of rain zigzagging down his cavernous dimples.
But what about my sailboat? This little wooden one, I mean. I'm sure it'll turn up in due time. But for now, let's get you out of this mess. There's no place for a boy anymore.
Raymond Barry rose forth. He grabbed Bradley beneath the armpits and hoisted him up, grunting with the strain. He led the boy through the soggy wooden fence, and they walked, slowly, nobly, through the drenched grass until they reached the side of the farmhouse. Ray told Bradley to spread his arms and legs wide as he grabbed the tangled-up water hose. He even made a joke about the silliness of a hose in a storm. They both chuckled as Ray turned the spigot to the left. The boy closed his eyes, his arms outstretched. He felt the gentle rinsing of the hose water, which differed in pressure from the rain. Every so often, the boy would wince at the slightest sting of the hose's water jet. The sting and the sweetness. He felt the clumps of mud and manure shoot off him, slowly, painfully. Soon the rinsing was done. Ray sprayed himself off as well and finally turned off the valve. The two rounded the side of the house that led to the front porch. Bradley looked at the red Chevrolet that sat in the gravel driveway. He smiled. He almost forgot that if Ray was at the house, that would mean also that...
Mom!
He yelled, running towards a petite blonde woman who was holding a dark green umbrella. The two embraced with a warm, pure joy.
Oh, my son, how are you?
Said Millie Barry softly.
Just finished up a little treasure hunt. That's so?
Said Millie, stepping back to behold Bradley's face.
You two find any good loot?
Bradley smirked and said,
Well, not exactly. You see... Go on, boy,
barked Clyde Overstreet from the top of his front porch steps.
Finish your little fairy tale, and there better be something for me at the end of it. Dad,
said Bradley, a lump forming in his throat.
We looked hard. We looked real hard. Honest. And we couldn't find it. But Ray said it'll probably turn up one of these days, so don't worry. It'll all be fine. That right,
said Clyde, a wild glow in his eyes.
Is that right? That what old Raymond Barry said? Clyde,
said Millie.
No,
Clyde said, stepping down to the gravel.
If Ray here said it, then it sure as hell must be gospel then, huh? Clyde, there's no need for any trouble,
Ray said.
We just stopped by for a friendly visit with our boy is all. Our boy.
Clyde stepped right up to Ray's calm face.
My boy. Mine. You understand? Clyde, he's mine too,
said Millie.
And now that we're here, I'm not sure this is the best place for him anymore. Oh, do tell,
said Clyde with a spit that disappeared into the rain.
Look at this place, Clyde,
she said.
No animals around. The grounds are dead and overgrown. The house looks like it's hanging on by a thread. Well, I'm sorry, Your Majesty, but maybe if your boy here was a better farmhand, then we'd probably have a bit more of a thriving establishment. Maybe then I could raise a little livestock instead of buying and trading to feed the little bastard's comic book addiction.
Bradley was so red he could have slugged his father right then and there. Had he the skin for the repercussions, that is. Did bottles of brown drink really make grown-ups sound so dumb? He had gotten 5 comic books in his entire life. 3 were from his mother, 1 was from Ray, and 1 was from Todd.
Clyde, now I don't know if you had a bit too much to drink or what, but I can't just sit back and let you talk to my wife and stepson like that. I just can't. Won't.
Clyde sniffed and pursed his chapped lips to one side.
You gonna stop me? If I have to.
Clyde nodded, rolling up his sleeves and tugging on his suspenders. Millie led Bradley to the other side of the Chevrolet. Ray nodded and looked to Millie, mournfully. Clyde Overstreet was fuming.
Well, I'll be damned if some newspaper man's gonna step foot on my property and tell me how to treat my own damn kid!
Ray didn't move. Clyde bounced towards him, his fists clenched and steaming.
Mom?
Whispered Bradley urgently. The boy knew the force of the bouncing beast better than most. Millie laid a single finger on her lip. Bradley obeyed.
I'm telling you, you don't have to do this,
said Ray.
Just calm down, Clyde, and we'll talk this out.
Clyde swung. Ray dodged swiftly. Clyde swung low. Ray parried and threw Clyde's forearm away. Clyde nearly lost his balance on the gravel and gave a guttural yell. Then he reared back for a final drunken haymaker, marked for Ray's stoic face. Ray ducked and threw one overhead blow, which struck Clyde square in the forehead. Bradley watched his father fly back into an overgrown thorn bush. And Clyde Overstreet lay flat as a pancake, his legs sticking out limply from the shrubbery that hugged the left side of the porch steps. He lay there panting, his eyes wide and frozen in a daze. Ray leaned in, his face mere inches from Clyde's.
I told you I didn't want any trouble, didn't I? Now, if I hear that you so much as plucked a single hair from that boy's head, I'll call the sheriff, and he'll take real good care of you. Is that clear?
Clyde said nothing.
Clyde, is that clear?
The flattened farmer nodded, teeth gritted.
All right,
said Ray before lifting the very man he'd just knocked down back to his wobbly feet.
Bradley, why don't you go on and fetch some blankets and a wet rag for your dad, then head on upstairs.
Yes, sir, said a dumbfounded Bradley. The boy scaled the steps and nearly crossed the threshold when his mother called out. Oh, Bradley. Ma'am? I got a call from Todd McSwiggan's mother. She asked if you'd be up for spending the night over at their place on Friday after school. I told her I'd ask you. Bradley nodded, and his mother shot a kiss before he went inside and laid blankets and a towel and a warm wet rag by his father's disheveled bed. Sometime later, after Clyde Overstreet was sound asleep beneath the drum processional in his own head, and after Millie and Raymond Barry had offered their loving goodbyes, Bradley Overstreet sat up behind the desk in his upstairs bedroom, one hand on the last page of a Mighty Maverick comic book, and the other propping his drying head upright. The boy stared out his window, which overlooked the backyard. The fields were still flickering with steady rain. He stared far out at the filthy cow pen. He and Ray's former craters had faded away with the deluge of fresh rainfall, as if they'd never existed. And somewhere deep within those depths waited a treasure, beloved and elusive. He was almost sure of it. Bradley exhaled softly, smiling before falling asleep to the drizzly thoughts of soon-to-be Friday night adventures and a promised day at sea. This episode of Several Stories High was written, composed, and produced by me, Nathaniel David Knox. Thank you so much for listening. You can learn more about me and the show over at severalstorieshigh.com. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts. And if you happen to use Apple Podcasts, do consider leaving a review. I would truly appreciate it. After all, was it not the great Leonardo da Vinci that said, hey, Raphael and others, I got this sweet code I think I'm gonna write a novel about, like Cowabunga, dude. Oh yeah, check out Several Stories High podcast or whatever. Cool, back to painting the Sixtine Chapel and junk. Probably word for word. What do you guys think? I really have no idea, to be honest. I thought you knew. And lastly, remember to keep up with the show on Facebook and Twitter and now Instagram. It's all at SSHpod or Shpod if you prefer. Just remember there's 2 S's. And until next time, I'm Nathaniel David Knox, and thanks for listening.
So